Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Such a treat to see all of you here practicing in person and online. It's Tuesday, and that means it's time for the Tuesday tune in. And so, as our program always begins with a guided meditation for about half an hour. And then I'll move into the Dhamma talk, and there will be time for questions or comments or reflections at the end. And yes, feel free to have your cameras on or off, whatever feels comfortable to you. Please be sure that your mics are muted. And this evening, we're going to do a slightly different meditation practice than we might usually do on a Tuesday. We're going to practice the radiating form of metta, loving kindness meditation. So for some of you, this is very familiar territory, especially folks who might be coming on Thursday mornings. This is something that we do quite frequently at a Thursday morning meditation. But before that happens, it's good to spend a moment and bring to mind an image or a phrase that sparks the quality of kindness for you. So, for some folks, it's a purring cat or a dog wagging its tail or a baby laughing or the face of a friend or something very simple that sparks the quality of kindness. Venerable Analio says he likes to use squirrels for his metta creature. Spark that feeling. Oh, may that being be well. All right, so you've had a moment or two to think about that, and we'll come back to that at some point in the meditation. But at this point, just shifting the attention to the body and really maybe some gentle movement, some rocking, moving the head. Beginning to sense the body settling on your seat. Relaxing the belly. Really feeling the natural stability of the body. moving the attention upwards. Allowing all the muscles around the ribs and the chest to also soften and relax. Softening the eyes, softening the mouth. And now bringing to mind an image that sparks that quality of kindness. Oh, may that being be well. And you'll know when you've found an image that's working for you, when you have that pleasant feeling in the mind. And kindness feels pleasant. And then you can imagine that quality. It begins to shine like a light, filling up your body, like your superpower, metta, kindness. Just like stardust gathers together and begins to shine, the quality of kindness begins to shine, fill up your body. And if that visual doesn't appear for you, it's all right to stay with the image and remind yourself of kindness that you've known. But if that light is present, you can allow it to spill even beyond your body, just naturally flowing out in front of you. You might use the breath as a support, stoking the light with the in-breath and allowing it to flow naturally with the out-breath. That light of kindness also flowing to the right of you. And light flowing behind you. Light of metta also flowing to the left of you. and kindness flowing beneath you. And the light of kindness also flowing up through your body and above you. And if you like, still using the breath as a support, brightening that light on the in-breath and flowing on the out-breath. And now releasing any limits, dissolving all boundaries, allowing that light to just flow naturally in all directions, flow still further. A light of kindness, fueled by your intention, fueled by the breath. That completes our meditation practice for today, this evening. And as I mentioned, I'm going to go directly into the Dhamma talk for this evening, but really welcome your questions or reflections or comments on that form of meditation after the talk, and hopefully they'll all tie in together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So we are nearing the end of our 7-week exploration of the 7 factors of enlightenment, 7 factors of awakening. They're called, in Pali, called the Bojjhanga. And that's okay if you haven't been here for the ones before today. I'm taking one factor at a time, and we're just exploring each factor individually. And then maybe at the end, I'll give a more general talk about all of them together. But just to name the 7 factors so that you have a sense for what the whole framework is. It's mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility. Today's is samadhi, which means absorption, or sometimes also translated as concentration, and then equanimity. Those are the 7 qualities that are said to be necessary to come together to in order for the mind to be able and willing to experience reality in a completely new way, in a way that will open up insight and wisdom. So the quality, as I said, the quality that I want to talk a little bit about today is this quality of absorption. Absorption. In Pali, it's called samadhi. It's sometimes translated as concentration, although I think more and more people are moving away from that translation, because if I were to say to you, okay, show me what concentration looks like, you might furrow your brow, or you would, you get a certain intensity of your attention. And there is perhaps a rigidity or a tension or a way in which we think we need to try hard in order to be concentrated. And yet, what the 7 factors is telling us quite clearly, and what many of the suttas are telling us, is that the things that are necessary, one of the key ingredients actually for the arising of absorption of the mind, is relaxation. The tranquility was the previous factor that came before, that calm, that settledness. And that makes sense in the context of samadhi or absorption as allowing the mind to relate to itself, to really have a minimum of other stimulation, and to begin to experience awareness, aware of awareness. That's really what we're talking about in terms of absorption. So it's not a tightening around something. Rather, I often like to think about it as the mind kind of riding along. So you rest the mind on something, and I'm going to talk in just a moment about what are the sort of traditional objects. But you rest the mind on that thing that you are using as your support for centering the mind. And then when the mind is able to rest there for some period of time, then there is less stimulation. There is a way in which it will, it's sort of naturally, I want to say this, and this, some people are skeptical about this because they haven't experienced it themselves, but naturally the mind wants peace. The mind tends to gravitate toward more and more peace. If you give it the conditions for that, it will do that. So one of the metaphors that I like to use is like your vision, right? So if your vision is blurred, and I've just been going through some of this in terms of health and in terms of my vision. If your vision is blurred, or like your glasses, if you're somebody who wears glasses or contacts and they're out of date, your prescription needs to change, or there's something in the environment, there's smoke or whatever, and you're trying to see something, then it's much more difficult, right? People often get headaches. For example, my daughter often gets headaches when her prescription gets far enough off that there's tension around trying to see. Yeah. But on the other hand, when there is this clarity, when there's an ability to focus, when there aren't obstacles and there's not the blurring or the smoke or whatever is the difficulty there, then seeing happens quite naturally. Seeing is just very simple and automatic and intuitive, and it's right there. It's clear. And there's not a lot of tension around it. It can be very relaxed. It can be just what's happening. Yeah. So that's one way to think about how absorption can be experienced. And so this is a key aspect of Buddhism, the emphasis on being able to settle the mind, focus the mind, achieve some clarity. This is very, very strongly emphasized in a lot of the teachings of Buddhism, not just early Buddhism, but also other different traditions that came later. And we should be clear that these certain kinds of deep meditation, absorption types of states were practiced in India before the Buddha came along. Yeah, in fact, one of the first things that he did when he left home was that he went and he meditated. He studied under a couple of very, very famous meditation masters, Uddaka Ramaputta, the son Uddaka, the son of Rama, and Alara Kalama. Actually, Alara Kalama was first, and then Uddaka second, according to the Buddha's way of telling it. But what he found was that those ways that he was practicing with them didn't quite go far enough. They weren't able to penetrate to a degree of clarity and a degree of focus of the mind such that you could see the insights that the Buddha was trying to unlock, that the Buddha later found are the ones that unlock suffering for us. And those insights are about volition, actually. That's one of the main learnings, you could say, that comes out of the ability to settle the mind, to experience these absorption states. And so the way that he taught it, the way that has come down to us over the centuries, over the millennia, is a way that is about teaching the mind to be clear and focused enough that you can then turn it to these other stages that we spoke about, the investigation, the mindfulness, the joy, and the other factors, to perceive the reality of how they actually work. So, and I want to just share something. This is a little bit technical, but I think you'll get it because it's a beautiful description, a beautiful metaphor, simile that's used in the suttas about this relationship between consciousness and attention. Did I talk about this last week? I don't think so, huh? So the Buddha said that if we think about consciousness as being like a bundle of reeds, yeah, like a bundle of, bamboo or whatever kind of reeds you might imagine, some stiff, grassy thing. So you have a little bundle of stuff like this. And then you have the bundle over here, and the bundle that leans up against consciousness is a bundle that includes the body and attention and the other parts of the mental experience. So not just consciousness as the bare awareness, but the other activity that's happening in the mind, like, feeling that something is unpleasant, or like wanting to respond to a thing in a certain way, make plans, the perception, even just being able to know the words for different things, all of that activity. So there's the body. This part is called name and form, namarupa. Name and form is one little bundle of reeds, and it's the name. Name means basically like that, all that cognitive activity bundled around attention. That's the key part that we want to pay attention to right now. Bundled around attention and intention. Sorry, both of those. And then you have consciousness. So the two, they lean against each other, the Buddha said, like this, like two bundles of reeds. One needs the other one in order to exist. And we know this in regular everyday life, right? In regular everyday life, we know that if the body dies, then the consciousness, this particular state of awareness that we're in, cannot continue. It doesn't survive. It's not possible. Right? And conversely, even if the body is well, if the conscious awareness isn't there, we call that brain dead, right? That's a person that happens quite often, actually, in the hospital. That when I was a chaplain, I saw that they would have to test people and see if there was any brain activity still happening, because there are ways that we can keep the body breathing and the heartbeat going and things like that, and yet there's no one there anymore. That person has died. Their consciousness, their conscious awareness is gone. So the reason I'm telling you this simile is because what the absorption does is it shows you this relationship. It shows you the role of bare awareness and how it is being propped up by our intention and our attention, both. And you can actually eventually drop off the attention and see that the consciousness also drops off, and that is nibbana, when there is that absence of those things. So you might say, well, how does all that happen? What does that mean for me as a person meditating? I sit down on my cushion. What does that mean exactly in terms of practical ways to think about meditation and ways to actually begin to observe the bare consciousness? This is the tricky part, right? Because it's very easy for us to observe the activity and the intention, right? If you're just even, you don't even have to be meditating. You can just sit quietly for a minute and watch your mind come up with a to-do list, right? That's it. That's your volition going, and I want to do this, and I need to do that, and I'm supposed to take care of that, and I got to pick up the car from being in the shop, right? Those are That's you observing your volition. But you're not observing it at a degree of precision that you can understand how it's propping up the consciousness. And that's what the settling and the absorption of the mind is intended to do, is intended to make that clear. So how? So let's talk about the factors. So there are factors that are necessary in order for absorption to happen. And the first two factors are just what I was saying a moment ago. There's vitaka and vichara. So vitaka means you put the mind on the object. So let's talk about objects. Objects for absorption meditation. There are a bunch of them, like I want to say 42, I believe, is the traditional number. There are lots of them. The one that most people use is the breath, the experience of the breath. The second most popular one, I would say, is metta, loving kindness. That meditation that we just did a few minutes ago, that meditation, I promise you, can take you all the way to some of the most advanced meditation states. Why? Because just as you can hear from the instructions, it is intended to, we're going to get to Kasina in just a second, Susan. It's intended to allow you to open the mind and bring that, that bright, pleasant awareness such that it squeezes out all of the obstacles. It elbows out all of that other stuff that's there, the restlessness, the sense desire, the anger, the laziness, and the doubt. All of that stuff gets pushed aside because there's this huge, bright, pleasant, flowing state that feels good in the body, it feels good in the mind. So then, as Susan put in the chat there are things called kasinas. And kasinas, I don't recommend that you practice meditation with kasinas without a teacher. That is a very messy prospect. You can get your mind into kind of a hook onto something that is difficult to let go of. And you don't want that, because a very, very powerful mind, if it hooks onto something that is kind of difficult in your everyday life, then that's problematic. That gets a little problematic, especially if you're early in this process and you're new to this kind of meditation. It's like, well, you don't really know how to make the mind let it go if you got stuck on something. So you really need to have a teacher if you're going to use kasinas. And kasinas are things like the four great elements of earth, water, fire, and air, or colors, actually, like blue is very, of the color kasinas. There are a variety of them. Blue tends to be the more popular one, because you could just look at the sky and see blue. And then the earth one is said to be also very easy. Earth is a very popular kasina in certain Asian countries. In Sri Lanka and in Thailand, for example, I believe it's pretty popular to use the earth kasina. And people would make an actual disc out of earth and use that as an object until they could have the mental image of it. So you figure out what your object is going to be. I highly, highly, highly recommend metta. But if you like the breath, great. The breath is also good. And if you have a great teacher who says you have a particular strength with a kasina, like an earth kasina, an element kasina or a color kasina, then great. Use that. But again, don't do those by yourself. So you turn the attention to the object. That's the first step. You just touch, taka, that's how I remember it. You touch the object with the mind, right? Or sometimes I think like you tack it on there, but tack it on again sounds like a little bit too aggressive. So you touch the object with the mind, and then we chara. So chara, the way that I remember it, is carry. C-A-R-A. It's V-I-C-A-R-A. So you let the mind be carried along with that object, right? You rest the mind, you find the thing, and then you let the mind be carried along with that thing. Why is that important? Because the continuity of attention is necessary for the absorption. And this is a very important point. So there are times when you need to be a little firm with getting the mind to stay with the object. But generally speaking, it's more like, I like to think of it as like the Teflon effect. So the mind is going to pay attention to the one object, what the breath, let's say for the sake of discussion. The mind is just going to rest with the breath. But everything else is like the Teflon effect. It just rolls off of you. If there's sound, if there's light in the room, if there's movement in your body, if there's any other thing, thoughts, any other thing that wants to come up, it just is allowed to slide off, slide off, slide off, slide off. Because any kind of struggle against those things is the opposite of allowing the mind to relax and settle, right? Then you're getting into a little bit of that kind of, wrong effort, you would say, getting into a little bit of like creating tension in the mind. And that's a very common mistake. When people are trying to establish concentration, it's a very common mistake to feel like actually unknowingly be trying to suppress thought and suppress other phenomena that's coming up. And then you come out of the meditation and you're angry or you're agitated or you're like confused and you wonder what's going on. And it's because of that. It's because there has been this sort of accidental, subconscious maybe, or just barely conscious way of actually creating a kind of aversion to the other objects that you're not trying to pay attention to. So rather than that, what I'm suggesting again is this Teflon effect. So you have the breath and you're staying with the breath and everything else just kind of keeps receding into the background. And eventually even the mind will stop talking to itself and things will get more quiet. And then usually that's when the piti arises. So piti and sukha are the other. So for the first jhana, so jhana is the Pali word that's usually used for these kind of absorptive meditations. And I just should be clear that you do not have to attain jhanas in order to practice well. You can have all different wonderful kinds of insights without jhanas. Trust me on this. It's very, very possible. In fact, there are whole schools of thought about this. It's called the dry insight method. There are whole schools. There are very famous teachers who go that direction. But again, I think actually that's the harder way. That's the harder way. So for the first jhana, you have the four factors: the applying the mind, the carried along with the object, part of the mind, right? The continuity of attention. And then you have piti. So we talked about piti already, right? That's one of the 7 factors of awakening. That is joy, this very beautiful, intense, pleasant, stimulated kind of joy in the body and the mind, piti. And why is that? Because the mind is so thrilled not to have to do anything else. Literally, the mind is so happy not to have to do, this kind of what we think is multitasking, but is actually look at this, 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 come back again, look at this, look at this. And that's what we're doing all day long. We are doing what in the computer world is called thrashing. Right? We're having the mind constantly trying to attend to many different things. So piti and then sukha. So what is sukha? I spoke about it also during the piti talk. It means contentment. It means contentment. It's a very simple feeling like, right? So piti is like, and sukha is like, That's how you can tell the difference. Okay? And then, so that's first jhana. And then you know that you have moved into second jhana when there is this feeling of effortlessness. So in the second stage of the absorption, what happens is you don't need to apply the mind anymore. Then the mind is like, oh, cool. Now I'm hanging out right here because this is very pleasant. This is a very happy state. It's a very pleasant state in the body and the mind. And you don't have to do this vitakka vichara thing anymore because there is this effortlessness that comes with it. I remember saying to my partner one time, many, many years ago, I went, it was just a regular weekend day, and I went into the bedroom and I meditated and came back out of the bedroom and I was like, some of you might know this metaphor and some of you might not, but you know that when the car goes into overdrive, like there's this way that the gear gets disengaged and the car is actually going faster, but it's because the thing is disengaged, not because the engine's working harder. The engine's actually working less. There used to be like a little button on my friend's car, his old Opel. So it's like that. So that's the effortlessness that you can sense in the second jhana. Not trying so hard to stay with the thing. Then third jhana means that the joy starts to kind of lose its fuel. The mind, again, wants peace. And so what does the mind do? The mind starts to let go of this very stimulating piti. Whoop, you realize, even that fun is like maybe less fun than a little more peace. Not in those words, right? Obviously, by this point, then the mind isn't really using words so much. So then the piti falls off, and then fourth jhana is then also the sukha falls off. Why? Because in fourth jhana, then you step away entirely from the sensations of the body. That is it feels like it's something very coarse at that point. And then again, the mind wants peace. It wants things that are more refined, more subtle, more easy. And so it will just move away. Sometimes it feels like, I often use this, it feels like there was a window that closed. Who's doing the closing? The mind is doing the closing, right? This is where we're studying the role of volition. What part is the volition that I think belongs to me, and what part is volition that just is happening in the mind as part of the five sankharas? So the window closes, and the body was left outside. There's no hearing, there's no touching, there's no smelling. None of that's happening. And it's not like you're trying not to do those things. It's just literally that there's no need for it. There's no need for it. And the mind, the awareness becomes more and more absorbed in itself. And so ekaggata is said to be that fifth factor. And that comes in at the second one. I got ahead of myself there. At the second stage, that stage where I was saying it's effortless, that's because of ekaggata. What is ekaggata? It used to be translated again often as one-pointedness, but we don't have a pointy mind at that point. We have a very soft, mellow, relaxed mind. So it's more like non-dispersion. It's like, again, the mind. Ajahn Chah said, if I don't go out to the sound doesn't bother me. The sound doesn't bother me. If I don't go and bother the sound doesn't bother me. That's the proper quote. And so that's what he's talking about. He's talking about non-dispersion. You don't go out and look for phenomena. So the important thing to remember about that is that we think that we are hardwired as primitive human beings to always be scanning our environment for threats. But the truth is that that's not true. The truth is that that is also something that is easily surpassed by these more profound meditations. So those are the 5 factors, step by step, how to go through the first 4 jhanas, what are called the form jhanas, or the basic absorptions. If you want a very good meditation for that, a very step-by-step meditation for that, you should try Anapanasati. So in and out, 16 steps of in and out breathing. 16 steps of mindfulness of breathing is a scheme that is very specifically set up to start with the body and then move toward the piti and sukha, and then move toward observing the mind until you get to the clear awareness, and then dropping into the concentration. It is literally built that way to help you do that. Okay? And you can find all kinds of guided meditations on that from me, from other folks on Dharma Seed or other places on YouTube, where you might find some recordings. Okay? The other side of it is, so that's a kind of step-by-step form of thinking about it. Sometimes, again, that's a lot of doing. It's a lot of like, you got to memorize the 16 steps or have your little cheat sheet, or, people find it hard to learn this part of resting the mind. So again, use a different object. Use the metta object. So what happens with the metta object? Well, so, I'm going to give you a contrast. So many, many, many years ago, I happened to sense that my dog settled down and I was sitting in meditation, and I took 4 breaths. And after that 4th breath, then there wasn't anybody observing anymore. There was still the observation happening. There was still the phenomena itself of the sound of breath, but there wasn't body and there wasn't a me watching or anybody watching, actually. Nobody driving the bus. That is different than the experience of the metta. So the metta experience is you fill the whole universe, which is your mind. You fill this boundless, limitless mind with the brightness and the pleasantness of the metta as an object, and keep adding energy to that. Keep making it brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. And eventually what happens is that, again, what does the mind want? The mind wants peace. So what does the mind do? It just pops that energy like a balloon. It just goes poof. And all that light and that spaciousness and all of that goes away. And the mind will suddenly just go literally like there's a sense of like dropping down into a well. Down, 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 down. All the energy's gone out of it. And again, because there was already that limitlessness of mind, there was already that mind which had gone beyond feeling these constraints of the body. Then when it pops the balloon, so to speak, and goes downward, it settles already in that place of the very, very absorbed in itself meditation. And that degree of stillness, having come out of the vastness, and that's why I'm contrasting the two, having come out of that vastness to that degree of stillness is mind-blowing. It like literally shows you, again, just the complete ungraspability of any state of mind, no matter how subtle, no matter how bright, no matter how pleasant, no matter how vast, no matter how willed or unwilled. It's completely ungraspable. So those metta meditations, the instructions are very simple. We just went through them. I have them right here on a sheet of paper. Actually, I didn't think about that, but they're right here on a sheet of paper. They're like 3 or 4 lines. They're repeated over and over and over and over again in the suttas. Very simple instructions. You pervade the mind and body with this quality, and you share it as big as you possibly can, because what is that doing? That's opening the mind, right? That's taking the mind beyond this constraint. And that, again, is filling it up with these wholesome qualities so that there's no room for the other things. There's no room for the obstacles. It's easier, I believe, for some people it's not, but I believe that it's easier than the kind of step-by-step method because it's harder to fall off. It's much more fun. It's bright. And it's this big, boundless thing, this big kind of fluffy, boundless mind. So it's not as hard as falling. It's not as easy to fall off as it is with the breath, for example, where you might think, oh, it gets boring after a while. Okay. So either way, the same qualities are being developed. Either way, the same qualities are being developed, that ability of the mind to find the object, rest in the object, bring forth, or actually wallow in the piti, the joy of it, that stimulated joy, and allow that to bring a contentment and a steadiness. And once those 4 factors come together, then it just has its own momentum. But if you want to try these meditations leading up to emptiness, you can try them without being able to do the jhanas. In Middle Length Discourse 121, the Buddha gives you instructions for how to do them, how to do these boundless mind meditations. And he specifically says that if you take it to the perception that goes beyond the boundless consciousness, and he gives instructions about how to do that, very brief instructions, because that's how the Buddha was, then you'll see that, again, that role of volition and how all these states, no matter how sublime, are being held up. The consciousness is being held up by the volition, and the volition is holding up, and the consciousness is holding up the volition also. They're in this mutual relationship. So I hope that has been a helpful endeavor for you there. Finally, I want to share a quote that I often share also about Ajahn Chah. So Ajahn Chah, who I mentioned earlier, is very, very famous, very dear, now long dead Thai forest master monk. And he said, kind of sort of in my lineage, actually, now that I think about it, or I'm in his lineage, so to speak, sort of, that's complicated for the bhikkhunis. But he said, you only need as much concentration as you need to read a book. That's really what you need to wake up. You only need enough concentration to read a book in order to wake up. So just know that, again, this is your nature. There is nothing, it's not a special talent, and it's not something that it's a very simple skill, actually, that is built upon the nature of the mind, that is built upon the way that the mind just, that's how it works, its own mechanisms, so to speak. So I wish you many pleasant bright, boundless states. And a few, or maybe more than a few moments of absolute stillness. Thank you.